Well, I think we've started. Welcome one and all. We are live. It's always strange starting a webinar where you can't see anyone's faces. I know Jake Al feels this all the time though on his pod. I'm still getting used to it. I'm used to getting all the visual feedback. But good morning, everyone. If you're on the East Coast, hopefully you're grabbing a coffee on the way to work. If you're in New Zealand, hopefully midway through the workday, sneaking out for a quick hour with Jake Al. This is not your average morning. Jake Al was very generous to join us. He just was mentioning to me that kind of every month he picks 1 in 100 things that he likes to do to kind of help out around the world. And we were the lucky ones this month. So great to have you with us, Jake Al. Before we get cracking, and by the way, my phone has been buzzing nonstop, Jake Al, literally endless emails, notifications, signing up for this session. There's so much excitement to see you.
Just so you know, my friends call me Jake Al. You can call me Mr. Calacanis. It's okay.
Mr. Calacanis, no, I can't do it. It's too strange. We were just discussing this
I'm
offline.
joking. People call me Mr. Calacanis now, and I'm just like, please don't do that.
Goodness,
I'm not that
makes me
old.
uncomfortable. Like I can't do that. I just couldn't. Even if you asked me to, I don't think I could.
Well, my dad's still around. We'll let him be Mr.
Yes,
Calacanis.
okay, absolutely. Happy to abide by that. I was saying to Jake Al before that it feels very strange to have listened to someone for tens of hours, and you know all about them. They know nothing about you. And you mentioned it was called like asymmetric intimacy. There's a term for it.
Yeah, celebrity, asymmetric intimacy. Podcasts have a very weird impact on people because I was just at, the Salt Lick, one of the great barbecue joints here in Austin. And literally a woman just came and sat next to me on my bench while, I was having lunch with my brother-in-law. And then the husband came, the kids came, and we all had lunch together. And they were just absolutely like, oh, Jake, how you doing? And I'm just like trying to figure out if I know them. And I don't. They are just fans and very friendly, and I had lunch with them. So
good.
It does happen. It's very weird. But, as you're saying, people hear you in their ears. And if you, maybe they get something helpful or sometimes entertaining out of a podcast, and then all of a sudden they've listened to 10 or 100 or 1,000, maybe they've gotten a lot of great, knowledge like I have from our 2,000 guests on This Week in Startups and 190 whatever all ins. I've learned a lot. So I can't imagine what it's like if I could listen to a podcast like the two I have when I was 15 or 20 or 25. That would have been mind-blowing for me. It didn't exist at that time. There was no medium for a business person. So I would watch Charlie Rose as an example to kind of get an array of guests.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, thank you for bringing them both to us. And I didn't realize kind of how long you've been running This Week in Startups for, but I wish I was onto it earlier.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get cracking into the good stuff, I am going to share my screen and just do some really brief intros around Startmate. So if you don't know Startmate and you're tuning in, here we go. Over the past decade, we've invested in over 250 startups, portfolio value of over 3.5 billion. The most relevant things for you to know as founders is that we have the accelerator, which is 120K investment. Applications actually opening next week, which is exciting. So you can go and express interest there. And we also have our small bets fund, which is a year-round vehicle that we invest really early stage, pretty much solely on you as the founder, all year round. So you can apply there too. And as investors, we have our accelerator fund, which is open now. There's a 15K minimum there. We have fund vehicles approximately every 6 months. We have micro funds. We like to keep it micro, and are going to continue to do that as well. And then we also have first believers. I think applications are now closed for first believers, but you might be able to sneak in a late one if we have any spots left. You kind of get 7 weeks of theory, 7 weeks of hands-on investing, all about angel investing. Jake Al would take a lot of quotes from you as well, and a lot of inspiration from your books. So with that all said, Jake Al, I mentioned this offline, and it would feel uncomfortable starting an interview with you without doing a bit. I love your bits. Some of them.
Okay. Cold opens. Yeah, some of those bits work. This week's will be pretty spicy.
Oh, will it? Okay. Looking forward to it. Yeah, Jake said he just got off an all-in recording, which should be good, just with the crew. But yeah, inspired by you. One of my colleagues said this is the shittest video he's ever seen, and he's not a fan of the All In podcast, doesn't listen. So, but I showed it to another colleague, and they absolutely loved it. Who is a fan? Okay. So I'm gonna hopefully take their approach. Let me share screen again.
All right, here we go.
Here we go.
Should I be nervous?
Jake Al, you have to pretend that you love this, even if you hate it.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, good. All right, here we go.
All right, everybody. Spore, the Rain Man, David Sachs, Chairman Dictator Chamath Palihapitiya, and Consultant of Science, David Freeberg. I am the world's greatest moderator, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Grok, grok.
So that's the way J-Cal usually introduces his co-hosts. But if you haven't listened before, I'm going to give you what their real intros should be. It's time for some renaming.
No interruptions, please. Thank you. La, da, da, da.
First up, we have Stone Cold Sax. You'd be forgiven for thinking he doesn't have much warmth in his heart, given the way he treats Friedberg's Science Corner.
Sachs has been texting me all week about it. He's like, I can't wait for Science Corner. I'm thrilled. He was shaking nervously.
He has been holding back, suppressing, denying the love he has within him.
You kept trying to paint me as the Trump supporter, which is not my agenda.
But no more. The cat is out of the bag. Sachs has been struck by love, and I've never seen him so happy.
Hello, everybody. I love that house he has. I love David's house.
Next, we have Check Me Out Chamath, our fame-stricken, pee while sitting, wine swirling, buttons down chiller.
Hate him, but you can't ignore him.
If you look closely enough at the video, you can see his eyes don't actually move. They are permanently glued to his own image on his Zoom screen.
How good do I look? I'm so sun-kissed.
And I don't think any of those buttons are button.
None of them are button.
Then we have Where Friedberg, our beloved science nerd.
Don't forget Science Corner today. We got a great Science Corner lined up.
If you hear the words US, debt, or economy, run for the hills, because Friedberg is at a generous $1 odds to go on a never-ending rant about the US debt crisis, and at such a pace that he ruins any chance of you listening to the pod on 2x speed. That leaves us with one left. I wonder what we should say about J-Cal. November 28, 1970. In the Bay Ridge neighborhood of Brooklyn, two wonderful US citizens awaited their birth of their third child. Later that day, a star was born. Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Jensen Huang, Naval Ravikant, Ben Horowitz, Mary Mika, Reed Hastings, Peter Thiel, Reed Hoffman, Mark Anderson, Sheryl Sandberg, Chamath Friedberg Sachs, but the strongest of them all.
I am the world's greatest moderator. I am the world's greatest moderator. I am the world's greatest moderator.
Jason Calacanis, our Nostradamus, superstar, Jason Calacanis, our Nostradamus, superstar.
There it is. Wow.
Love you guys. I love you guys.
There you go.
Wow. You know what? I was absolutely so touched by that. Ben, I have one piece of advice for you.
Go on.
Don't quit your day job. I think we got to leave the songs to young Spielberg, but it was a great attempt. It was a lot of enthusiasm.
That's what we want. J.K., I saw you smiling. That's all that mattered to me.
Yes.
You've done some seriously embarrassing things in those best intros, but I love them. They make me smile every time. So glad I brought a smile to your face. Hopefully some people that know the pod smiling
Absolutely.
too. I won't be quitting my day job. Don't worry.
187 participants. Holy cow, you got a good turnout here.
Yeah, hell yeah. And it's only 8 a.m. There's going to be a lot of people watching the recording of this too, I imagine.
No problem.
All right, let's dig into it.
Sure.
So I'm going to give you a quick intro, just so everyone knows who you are. I'm sure they all do, but just in case they don't, as I mentioned in the video, born in 1970, New York, Brooklyn, middle-class family, kind of early 90s, became a journalist, then, launched the Silicon Alley Reporter, the print magazine in New York. And then 2003, 2005, you founded Weblogs, before my time. Sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, which then got sold. That was a big break. Then you had your whole kind of era of investing in the early stages of Uber and Evernote and Thumbtack. Then you started This Week in Startups, the pod, all the way back in 2009, which I can't believe. Is that right? And then you started Launch, and then through Launch, you've already invested in 300 startups, 8 have turned into unicorns. You've got your 12-week founder university in there. You've got your 14-week accelerator. You got your fund and syndicate. You invested in around 100 founders a year. And then you published the book. If you're interested in angel investing, you should absolutely read the book. Published in 2017. Then 2021, you started the All In Pod. That's when I really started listening in on a weekly basis whilst I'm in the gym, working the mind and body. I absolutely love it. You are super entertaining. I used to describe you as, how did I say it? That it's sometimes hard to listen. There's a lot of egos in the room, but I just couldn't stop listening. And I learned a lot from it. And I think you've also copped a lot of flack over the years in the podcast, but that's why I made the tribute video. I think your superpower is like cut through and simplifying things. And love the way you moderate the pod. So kudos to you.
Thank you, my friend. Yes. And we have an audience of founders, correct? Or
exactly.
angels or venture capitalists. Who's in the audience? We
have a mix, but the topics for the session today are all about founders looking to expand and raise in the US. So in terms of agenda, we're going to have about 15 minutes to chat through the differences between Australia and the US, Australia, New Zealand, and the US, and then 15 minutes also to talk about how to approach raising in the US. And then we might get hopefully some time for some questions at the end, maybe a couple on the Slido if back there you're monitoring that, and then we can go from there. So to kick us off, maybe we'll start actually with a personal one, J. Cal. I mean, you've come a long way. I just went through your long history, your long career. What is like the first thing that comes to mind throughout your career that you're most proud of over the past 20, 30 years?
Wow. Most proud of over the last 30 years of my career.
Gut feeling.
Yeah. I mean, people tell me I've helped them get into entrepreneurship. I've changed their lives. People I've never met before. And, that's, as you can imagine, incredibly touching to have somebody stop you at an airport and say, you don't know me, but you changed my life. And they'll say, I listened to an episode. I just had this happen recently. Somebody sent me a pair of beautiful headphones. And he said, hey, I'm the founder of headphones.com. I watched your episode with Alex too from com.com. And you talked about what a great domain name it was and how important like great domain names, premium domain names are for building trust and in Google search results. This episode happened a long time ago. And he figured out a way to get headphones.com. And he said that his business changed forever just by listening to that one episode, and therefore his life changed. And now he's coming to the All In Summit next week, and I think he's putting in the speaker bags like some incredibly expensive headphones for each of our speakers. It was incredibly nice of him, and he sent me these nice headphones, which I wasn't going to accept, but he's like, I've made tens of millions of dollars off your advice. Please let me send it. And I hate to. The way I grew up was you help people because it's the right thing to do, not because of some quid pro quo. But I let him send me the headphones because I kind of felt bad saying no, because I said no like twice. And then I was like, okay, I'll just let him send me the headphones.
Where are they? You've got to be wearing them.
Well, it's interesting. They're right here. And these are $5,000 headphones you can go buy from a company called Focal in France. And I didn't think, I thought I knew everything about, audio stuff. And then it turns out this receiver I have does high fidelity music, like FLACs, like the original files that are 100 times bigger than MP3s. And I got this service Cobuzz. I got this name router he gave me. I got these headphones. And now at night, I listen to these headphones, and he's changed my life because I get such equanimity and joy from listening to these incredibly high-res albums that I've loved my whole life, but I didn't hear all the music. And I never would have done it because I never would have spent $5,000 on headphones for myself, or, $5,000 or $10,000 for an amplifier to do it. So he kind of, did something nice for me. And so I think, one of the great things in my career has been this really beautiful, beautiful gift I've been given, that I'm good at having a conversation with somebody. And that information comes from that conversation that other people get value from. And, I give that to my father and my grandfather, because I'm Greek on one side and Irish on the other, and they're incredible storytellers. They're great at talking. And I grew up in Brooklyn, where we would stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning on the stoop, just talking and joking and having a great time. And so, for a kid from Brooklyn to be where I am now, it's pretty amazing. And I don't take it for granted. And I just love the fact that, somebody comes on the podcast, it changes their life. They learn something, it changes their life. And then I've invested in 400 companies. People don't know that. And I invest in 100 more every year. So just law of big numbers, I've been able to, be involved with some legendary companies, obviously Uber, Robinhood, Calm, Wealthfront, DataStax, Thumbtack, Athena. You can go to athenawow.com and get a free month. Use my domain name, tell them I sent you. And I've just been so lucky. And, I've collected all these great friends. And so, putting aside business for a second, I've also been able to develop great friendships with people who are doing important work in the world and have meaningful time and experiences with those friends, and then also with my family. So, like today, how old are you, Ben?
Oh, yes. Go on. Give me something.
How old are you? You're 22, 23? You look good.
27. I get that a lot.
You're
Though.
27,
I can't
right?
grow a beard. That's the issue. Yeah.
Ah, got it. Okay. You're 27, right? And so, imagine being a kid from Brooklyn and then I'm going to go to Japan for a week to ski. No, maybe 2. Okay, I'll do it. Oh, this group in the Middle East, who is doing incredible stuff in the world, wants to do a partnership with me to do these incredible things in the Middle East. Oh my God, that's incredible and nice. So, I get these kind of great moments
Yeah.
in my life with friendships and life-changing events. And then I get to curate my own life. I'm sitting here on my horse farm in Austin, which is, tens of acres. And I go for walks on my ranch now. And I'm like, wow, I live on a giant ranch and I know all these great people. And my life is, my life has exceeded any possible dream I could have had as a child. And when I do a speaking gig, I'm not getting paid for this one, but I frequently will have people offer me an amount of money to speak for 1 hour that is double what my salary was at my first job. And, you're sort of trying to comprehend what's happening. And I hope, a number of my friends died early, but I'm hoping I get another 20 or 30 years, or maybe the science, maybe I get 30 or 40. And man, I can't imagine how great the next couple of decades are. So I enjoy every sandwich I eat is a long-winded answer to your question. And I just love people. I love people.
Hell
That's
yeah.
for me, my absolute drug. I'm not into drugs, but if there was a drug I was into, it would be interesting people.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
friendships with them.
Thanks for continuing the goodwill legacy that exists in the startup ecosystem. Love having you here. I noticed one thing that,
and you're doing it too right now, right? You're doing it too right now by reaching out to me and helping people get this advice. There's 216 people here. Maybe today somebody has a question and we can really help them. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I mean, the one thing I have to comment on is it looks like you've outgrown yourself with your bookshelf. I was thinking maybe as a gift we should get you some thick Harry Potter sets to start filling that up.
My kids love Harry Potter. It is nuts how many times they've watched it. And I went to Harry Potter Land this year at Universal and we got the wands and we had a great time with that beer butter. But not my IP. I'm more of a Star Wars guy, but we're Blade Runner. But sure,
we'll have to agree to disagree there. All right, let's jump in. Let's get to the good stuff. I'm going to start at a high level. You've been an investor in the most dynamic tech startup scene globally. What do you think are some of the hallmarks of a great startup ecosystem? And what kind of can Australia and New Zealand learn from that to grow our own?
It's a great question. The most important thing is small numbers of people getting together. And so it turns out in every movement, one of the things that occurs is a little bit of sharing and competition and camaraderie. So if you look at film in the United States in the 60s and 70s, there's a great book, something Easy Rider and something. And it was about The Godfather, The Conversation, The Manchurian Candidate, and then, Francis Ford Coppola, Spielberg, George Lucas, all of these 60s kids becoming filmmakers. And they were competitive with each other and they were collaborative. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas did the film Indiana Jones together. They created that together. Star Wars, Spielberg gave feedback on, et cetera, et cetera. And then you look at art in the 80s in the United States, we had Basquiat, Warhol's Factory. So sometimes a space emerges where people hang out, deals get done, people are inspired. It's happened in the music scene in New York City in the 60s and 70s. You had the folk music scene, and then you had the punk scene when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, and then new wave. When I grew up, when I was a young adult like you in the 90s in New York, two things emerged, the internet and hip hop. And I got to hang out with all the names in hip hop, Jay-Z, David Mays from the magazine The Source. I had my magazine, Silicon Alley Reporter. And so I think hosting events like this, having small breakfasts, bringing together founders, and having them spend time together is critically important. So I started something called Founder Fridays with our podcast, and it's in 26 cities right now. And I just said 6 founders get together, create a pod, a POD pod, like dolphins, and just commit every first Friday of the month, get together and talk about how your business did for the last 30 days and what your plans are for the next 30, and then try to help each other. And it's had a profound impact on people's lives. And then we just got somebody to sponsor one of the cities for $1,000, $333 per event to buy them dinner. And I was like, oh my God, that's so kind that somebody would do that, right? And I think that's the key thing. Small groups of people getting together, inspiring each other, pushing people. Because if you're an artist, a musician, a comedian, like in Texas right now in Austin, Joe Rogan and the guy from Kill Tony, they've really started to build a community of comedians and podcasters here. And so, there becomes a little healthy competition, camaraderie, inspiration, knowledge sharing, and that's what's occurred, in Silicon Valley, New York, Austin, Los Angeles, and Miami for startups. And you have that down there as well. So that's my best suggestion. And then it really helps if a company wins and then everybody who was in that company, like Atlassian and Canva, takes, 10% of the money they made and they invested in startups, that are behind them. And maybe they hit another winner and you get this virtual cycle. In Europe, you don't have this. The existing families who've made tons of money, they don't invest their money, they protect it. Everything's about protecting wealth, not about taking risk. So you got to take a lot of risk. And you guys have multiple venture firms down there now. You used to have none or one, and now you got American firms opening up shop or, coming down there on the regular. And the spirit of Australian entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in New Zealand is very similar to me of the pirates in America, maybe even a little bit more rugged and sharp elbowed and tough, right? Well, I mean, if you're dealing with those whites and tigers and, saltwater crocodiles I saw when I was up in Cannes and at the Great Barrier Reef, and man, there's you got some great predators out there, and I think it makes people tough. When I jumped off a ship, I had rented a little sailboat and had a party with a dozen people, and we had to swim to shore. And I said, is it safe? And he said, yeah, just watch out for the sharks. And I said, okay. And I said, is that a joke? He's like, no, there's great whites here and whatever, but they usually don't come into this cove. And so, yeah, just be careful.
Yeah, perhaps we get a tougher reputation than we deserve with all that. I don't think I've ever seen a shark really in my life, aside from when I seek them out, but we'll take it. Flipping to the other side of the coin there, JCal, what are some of the weaknesses you've noticed popping up in the US startup ecosystem?
I've witnessed multiple boom bust cycles. And when you have a cycle and it's starting to get frothy, valuations are going up, you get a lot of transient people, on islands. You get tourists, right? So in Hawaii, it's very annoying for people, the tourist season, because they come, they create a mess, they're disrespectful, they spend a bunch of money, which is great for the economy, but, then they leave. But, they become enamored with the island for, a couple of years, and then they leave and go back to the mainland. They're not committed, in other words. And we get that every time. And so it's pretty annoying when you have investors come in, they don't join the boards of companies, they flood them with capital, or they give them bad advice. That can be a little annoying. Or you get, on the other side of the table, people who aren't really entrepreneurs and are not really committed, and they start a company, and then the company they don't work hard. They're going to conferences and fucking around and not taking it seriously and wasting money and paying themselves huge salaries, and they're not focused on their customers. And then it goes belly up, and they take the last, 6 months, and they give themselves a 6-month severance package and take the laptops and they abscond with them. And you're like, what just happened to the company? And they're like, yeah, it didn't work out. So that can be annoying. The good news is the power law, will get rid of all the, bad things that occur. Just like credit cards have 1%, 2%, 3% fraud, whatever, 1% fraud, and they try to fight against it, but it's not worth asking everybody to show their passport and do a biometric to spend money and slow them down. So, those are the things that are annoying for me.
Yeah.
Is people not taking the work seriously.
Yeah, somewhat inevitable. And do you think that if you maybe put a different way, if you were starting, San Fran from scratch somewhere in the world, you could start your own ecosystem. What do you think you'd do differently? What would you wish you could change about it?
But you're saying, what would I change about the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, if you were starting from
In
scratch, if you were somewhere, you
oh
were starting a new ecosystem somewhere else in the world, and you could do whatever you wanted to start it in the
yeah,
best possible way. What do you think you might change or do differently to what currently exists in the US or in San Fran or in Austin?
well, I do think co-working spaces and getting people into offices again is really important, because that's where those collisions happen. And working at home makes people weird. As nice it is to work from home, and I'm working from my home studio right now, but I'm literally getting an office here in Austin, and I'm going to have some co-working space for folks and an event space. So I'm in the process of dialing that in. And once I have all that dialed in, I think, I'll be back to, what I think is important, which is being in the room with each other, talking about these ideas. So yeah, I think having a physical space, having a lot of people in it to, have collisions and ideas bouncing things off each other, learnings. I would also, really like to see the governments of different countries allow investors, 100% of populations to invest in startups, even though they're high risk, and have them be able to invest small amounts of money. So you guys have the concept of sophisticated investors.
Yep, we
In
do.
Australia, we have accredited investors. It's hard to get these. There really should just be a test. You should be able to get, just like you can get a firearm license in some states in the United States. Other ones, you just buy it. You have to get a driver's license in all 50 states. If you want to cut hair in the United States, probably 40 of the 50 states we have here, you need a license and you get tested to cut hair. And so that sounds crazy, right? Like, why should I pay? But it's like, well, people don't want to get a bad haircut. So for whatever reason, do people have to get a license in Australia to cut hair?
I am not
Is there a
qualified to answer that
licensing?
question, but I'm going to, I mean, people do courses, but I'm
Well,
going to assume
you
not.
do the
I don't
self
know.
cut, right? As I can see, you're cutting yourself. Yeah, it's
Wow,
a joke.
shots
It's a joke. Well, you
fired.
want it to be. You want it to be part of the all-in gang, so you got to
No,
take
that's
the
good.
cut.
I appreciate
But yeah,
that.
no, I
Keep
do
it
think
coming.
allowing more people to participate in the party would be great, and you could come up with some very
Yes.
common sense rules, like, hey, anybody in the world can invest $10,000 a year in startups. Doesn't matter how much money you make. So like, that's not going to bankrupt somebody. I mean, it could temporarily bankrupt themselves, but if the minimum wage in Australia is $15 or $20 an hour, whatever it is, like, they can make it back in a pretty short period of
Yeah.
time, right? It's not
And
the
there's
end of
so
the
many
world.
other avenues to waste your money on far worse things. And
Every
yeah,
time I go to Australia, there's that little room with a casino in it and a bookmaker, right? When you're in a bar, they have a little room you can go
oh, it's
into and
horrible.
gamble.
Yeah, we're shocking with our gambling. Absolutely terrible with it.
Yeah.
It's gotten
But I
so
mean,
bad now. When you watch sport, they play a gambling ad, and then there's an ad from the government or an ending to that ad to say, "Please don't gamble." That's how backwards we've become.
here's an idea. Adults have the freedom to do adult things. The
Indeed.
end.
Yeah, it's actually we're working on this at the moment. Kate and I in the investment team. It's on one of our projects at the moment is to find a way to enable people who are not sophisticated investors to start investing in startups with a
It would be
test. With a
great.
course.
If your country figures that out, I might start, we have this thing, the syndicate.com, where we've got like
Yes.
10,000 investors and 4,000 or 5,000 of them have actually done a deal. I would actually do one in, I would do a syndicate just for Australia if you work that out.
Let's go. Okay, I'm going to take the snippet of that and I'm going to show it to the right people, and we'll see if we can make it happen. Okay, the other question I had in this topic, and we'll move on to the other one. I want to make sure this is a super practical session for founders as well. What do you think the average US VC would think about Australia? Like, would they recognize local Australian big VCs?
Oh yeah, they're well
Or
aware of it. Canva, Atlassian,
the companies.
Blackbird. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, and the professionalism, of the investment community there. Yeah, it's pretty well established, and there's other great things working for it. English language, incredibly affluent population. It's a bit of a monoculture. You've got a large group of people, who, whatever, some large percentage of the population in Australia, it's 30 million people, I believe, think similarly, have similar thoughts, have similar habits. It's not like Europe or South America, where it's very disparate, and, what might work in, Chile might be very different than Uruguay or Paraguay.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Australia, New Zealand, very much sibling type vibes. But we have a lot of stability here. I'd say we're definitely very diverse, although we might be quite unified. We're quite a successful diverse country, if I can say so.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
listen, you think it's diverse. It's not. If you think about how, forget about the color of people's skin, et cetera, just the amount of money people make is high, and you've got a lot of affluent, you've got great middle class. They spend a lot of money. They like the same food. They like the same music. They like the same fashion. Like, 30 million people is not a lot. That's like, there's probably 20 cities in China that are 30 million or more. There's many states in the United States that have 10, 20 million people in them. So, it's going to have a certain commonality, which makes launching a product much easier. If you were to launch, Uber in Australia, it's not like you're launching it in a bunch of different markets. Like you understand the Australian consumer pretty quick.
Yep.
Just like Canada, Canada is a similar, and that's why a lot of entrepreneurs and VCs will look in Canada and Australia for teams, talent, investors, startups, is because we're all speaking the same language. Launching Airbnb in those three markets and New Zealand, it's going to be about the same experience.
Yeah.
You launch a SaaS product in those four markets, pretty much the same experience. In fact, many companies will launch in Australia, New Zealand, or Canada before they launch in the US to covertly test products.
Interesting. The testing ground. We're happy to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking it to a very practical level, when do you think is the right time? I mean, it's still obviously the case. We have as you know, a growing, wonderful ecosystem here. Big VCs are here. There's much more capital, way more than there used to be, which was zero, probably 10, 15 years ago. When's the right time? Although all that exists and we're growing and it's fantastic, still there's the US market's enormous. There's a lot of capital in the US, so many VCs, so many niche VCs, whereas we're more generalists here for the most part. When is the right time if you are going to go and try and raise in the US? Is it throughout all stages, or is it you should probably try and test things locally, raise your first rounds here, and then try and go to the US? What stage is the right time to try and raise from the US?
Okay, so anytime you have 20% month over month growth or 5% week over week growth, you will be put into a bucket of a high growth startup who's probably figured something out. And if you figured something out and you've done that for 10 weeks, 10 months, you will absolutely, if it is a scalable, high margin business, be able to raise capital. So let's say we'll put startups into three buckets. One is you have product market fit or market pull. Canva, or some of Atlassian's products, Jira, at certain point in time, they had market pull. People were going to their website, they heard about it from friends. And that category of product market fit is strong. And you're growing, like I said, low single digits week over week, 3, 4, 5, 6% week over week, which on a compounded basis equals 20, let's call it 10, 20, 30% month over month, which means based on the rule of 72, you can look that up later. If a company's growing 25% a month, every 3 months it's doubling in size. VCs are looking for that moment. So that would be group one. Then you have group three. Group three are startups that cannot get customers. They cannot launch their product. They can't get people to use their products. They can't raise money. They can't get team members. For whatever reason, those teams or solo founders cannot get any product market fit, customers, or team members. And so when VCs see bucket three, they say, well, why am I meeting with them? They should go back to their laboratory and figure it out. So if you're a solo founder and you don't have a product launched, you're basically not capable of raising money. You need to have 2 or 3 co-founders. You need to be technical. The product needs to be iterated on, whether you have money or not. In other words, you're basically ramen profitable. You make enough money to pay for your food, or you got some side hustles where you can keep the company growing. That puts you into bucket 2. So bucket 2 is the largest bucket in startup land. And that bucket is variable about when you should go see investors. You shouldn't see them when you're in bucket 3. You should see them when you're in bucket 1. Bucket 2 is, I got a couple of customers. I'm churning customers. I've got 2 of my 3 team members. I got 4 of my 5. My CAC is upside down. I'm spending $500 to get a customer that's spending $100 a year with me. And in that case, it's okay to meet with investors, but you should expect it's going to get harder and harder to raise money. Now, why would somebody invest in a company that's in that bucket too? Well, the reasons they tell me, because we'll send them a lot of our startups coming out of our accelerator in bucket 2, figuring it out. We'll call it like group 1 is thriving, group 3 is dying, group 2 is grinding. So in the grinding group, if they see progress over time, you met with them 6 months ago, you came back to them 6 months later, the product's launch, you have 100 customers, you're losing money on every customer. Then they see you in month 12 and you've got 400 customers and 100 of them are profitable and you raised 100K from friends and family. Now you start to get the sense, well, this startup is figuring some things out. They're relentless. They're not going away. And for investors, you really need to, if you're going to invest in bucket 2, you're betting on the team in a major way. And you're going to look at, for our firm, I have 13 qualities we look for in that group. And, you know, having multiple co-founders, technical co-founders, and product velocity is the name of the game. Product velocity is a fancy way of saying the product's getting better every day, every week. They're shipping product. If you're not shipping product, you don't have a great team, you don't have customers, you've basically proven to the investment community that it's not time to meet. And so just be super, super aware of that.
I might dwell on one point there, which I think is well understood, but by some, but by many, probably there's a movement against it, which is the idea, as you say, which is, I think, the pendulum swinging back the other way, where we're now very open about speaking about needing technical co-founders. Do you want to speak to that a little bit and why it's so important?
Okay, so at a certain point, a firm like mine, Launch, which you can see at launch.co, launch.co. And if you want to apply for funding, launch.co/apply. We get we're on track some weeks to get 20,000 applications for funding a year. We've had weeks where we've done 110, 120 introductory meetings. And so that's a lot. That doesn't exist in many firms. The only other firm that really does that is Techstars and Y Combinator. So you start looking at that amount of progress and, you know, you get a pretty good idea of what's, why when people hit that level of deal flow, I can only say yes to 1 in 200 companies. So it's less than 1%, it's half of 1%. So what we learned was a solo founder doesn't go as far as multiple founders, and multiple technical co-founders can have product progress fast. And then companies have to raise $1 million and give it to a dev shop in Ukraine, in, you know, Japan, in India, in South America. They just don't seem to move as quickly. And they spend 5 times as much money, 10 times as much money. They're not as capital efficient as we need them to be in that early stage. So that's why people want developer and technical co-founders, because they go faster and they do it cheaper and they're more capital efficient. So product velocity exists. They get more shots on goal because they do more tests and they need less capital. So if I told you this person can open a restaurant for $100,000 and get it open in 30 days. And another person says, I can get it open in 12 months for $3 million or for $1 million. If you're an investor, you'd say, oh, let me give the 100K to this person. I'll give 100K to 5 people and see what happens, right? Yep. And that would be a better use of proceeds. So we're making bets. They call them investments. We're making investments and we want to be as thoughtful as possible with our LPs, the limited partners capital. And we want to make the most educated bet. So at Founder University, which is like our 12-week pre-accelerator, it's for people who don't know if they want to have a company yet. And we don't invest in all of the companies that come there, just about 10% of them, but 250 teams come. We invest in 25 of them. And, you know, that is cooking with oil. And we just watch product velocity for 12 weeks. If they have product velocity, if they've got 3 co-founders, if 2 of them are technical, we're probably going to put in a 25K, 125K, or even a 500K check.
Unreal. Yeah, I think Michael Siebel put it really well when he said, you know, you wouldn't start a rocket company without anyone on the team that knows anything about physics, in the same way that you shouldn't really be investing in companies, software companies that don't have technical co-founders. I think that really hit for me when he said that. In terms of taking those 3 groups, so we've got group 1, group 2. So group 3, if you're really struggling, trying to raise in the US is probably not the best idea. Certainly flying there with no agenda and just hoping for the best is probably not a great idea. But group 1, group 2, so either you're killing it, you got the growth metrics that everyone's looking for, or you're figuring it out, but you've shown some level of progress. What's the best way to approach the US? Is it super important to be there in person? Can you do it remotely? Has things changed post-COVID in that regard?
We are in the process of getting back to office, and people like Elon or Palmer Luckey or Keith Raboy, myself, others are starting to realize the companies in person move faster, have more dedicated employees than the ones with fully remote teams. So it's all coming back to in person. The advantages to the companies who are in person, and doesn't mean you can't have remote employees. If you have somebody who is I would say top 20% of performers, let them work from wherever the hell they want. Let them work whatever hours they want. For the other 80%, I think they work better, and it's better for the company for them to be in an office. So if you have some salesperson, I have one of them, his name's Matt. He's my great partner, and he just, gets it done. He doesn't need to be managed, and he likes to ski. And so he lives in a ski town, and during ski season, if he wants to ski, if it's great snow, fuck it, ski all day, and then do your job at night. I don't care. It's a sales position. I want him happy. I want him thriving. So go for it. Now, if it's a young sales executive, I kind of want them in the office next to some older sales executive or more experienced one getting mentorship. And so that's the only bummer, is sometimes you have a high performer and you wish they were in an office mentoring everybody, but you take a high performer if you can get one. And so if you want to differentiate yourself, stop with the nonsensical work from home stuff, challenge your team to get into an office, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 days a week. In my day, it was 6 or 7 days a week. The debate in my day was not about coming to the office. It was how much time did you put in on nights and weekends?
Yeah.
So, the industry is coming back to that, and it just depends if you want to really pursue excellence or not. Some people want to pursue excellence. Some people want quality of life, which I understand. I'm older now. I've got kids. If you want quality of life, and I live on a ranch. But, this morning I was up at 7 a.m., sitting outside, having my coffee, looking out on the ranch. And all I did was look through the Slack room called First Calls. And I went through my associates' calls, and I looked at it, and I asked maybe 15 probing questions, and I wrote 15 important lessons in there for 2 hours. And so, you can do it remote. You can mentor remote. You can really burn the midnight oil. But if you really want to raise funding and you have competitors, get into an office.
And so in terms of fundraising, so moving from, obviously being in person as the fastest way to grow, in terms of, you're in group 1, group 2, so either you're killing it or you're figuring it out. Do you test the waters first? Do you send a few emails, like making this hyper practical? Where do you start? Like the US is this whole other ecosystem we know very little about as an early stage founder. Like, where do you even begin? Are there lists you go to? Should they come to you, JCal? What should they be doing?
I think if you're in Australia and you're in the thriving group, just email the top 20 VCs that you want to meet with. Say, I'm in, I'm going to be on Sand Hill Road. We're growing 4% a week. We've had 3 weeks where we grew double digits. Our customers include X, Y, and Z, and would love to meet with you. I'm there for these 10 days. And then just see if they want to get a quick coffee and say, I'd love to meet with you for 30 minutes and see, what you think of our team. And I'm going to be there with my CTO and my other co-founder, who is the director of sales. And I also have our product manager. So the 4 of us will be there. That comes across as really charming and dedicated. So I like that move. Now, if you're in the figuring it out, I think asking for an introductory meeting, I see you've invested in X, Y, and Z. I think that we're related to your thesis because of A, B, and C. We're pre-revenue. I would love to get on a call with you on a quick Zoom and show you the product for 10 minutes. The other power move is to create a loom. You have to understand, people go for quantity over quality. I would advise going for quality. So I would send a loom where you say, hey, Jason, I saw you at Startmate. Here's what I'm working on. I wanted to show you the product. I heard you say co-founders matter. Let me show you my 2 co-founders, and you pull up the LinkedIn page. You said customers matter. Here's our 2 lighthouse customers. Here's their invoices and how much they're paying us. Let me show you the product. And you send me like a 5-minute Zoom. A loom that's personalized to me. You think I'm not going to click it? It would be disrespectful for me not to click it. Now, I might forward it to somebody on my team who specializes in B2B or SaaS or marketplaces and have them look at it first. But generally speaking, I would make it incredibly hyper-personalized if you're in that second group. If you're in the third group, you should not be emailing people. That's just dumb, because it's just going to make you look bad. And it's going to make you look dumb that you don't understand that, some giant VC firm doesn't meet people when they're, have nothing but ideas or paper or a deck. It generally doesn't happen.
And in terms of going, I mean, I'm not sure if everyone would be as generous as you are in terms of clicking on that Loom video, but do you think warm versus cold still makes a big difference in today's day and age? Or
I mean, if you get an introduction through one of my founders, I'm taking the meeting. So yes. But my founders know, like, don't waste Jason's time, because, they might have a hard time getting in touch with me and spending time with me at this point in my career. So, like, that's why I would take it seriously. If Raul from Superhuman said, you have to meet this person, I'd be like, okay, I've invested in 2 of Raul's companies. I should meet with them. And also it's respectful to Raul. So there you have it.
So if you're in group 2, the thought of just dropping everything, flying to San Fran and hoping for the best, probably not your best play.
I would test the waters by doing 10 looms directed very specifically at people. Then 3 months later, if they watched your loom, or do a follow-up to the loom and then send them another update in 3 months in another loom, and then, play the long game. You really want to play the long game with investors. You're thinking about it like building a friendship, building a collaboration. So if you've sent them 3 looms every 3 months for 9 months, or every other month for 6 months, and you've shown progress, then maybe that's the time to say, if they reply, hey, I'm going to be in this week. I would love to get a cup of coffee with you. I think we figured it out, and we're very similar, as I said in my previous emails and to my looms, X, Y, and Z. We're like these other companies you've invested in, and I would love to get your advice on this. And they say, oh, you're fundraising? And say, we're meeting with potential partners, but we don't have specific fundraising plans right now. That's another power move. Like, we're not necessarily fundraising. We're just meeting people in anticipation of that. We're kind of trying to figure things out first before we raise more capital.
Because as soon as you say you're fundraising, the clock starts. And if you've been fundraising for months, that's a real anti-signal for a lot of it.
That's definitely part of it. And you also don't want to seem desperate or spastic, because then people put you in the category of like catching a knife. Like, oh my God, the startup is failing. The more I get involved with it, they're kind of like a drowning swimmer. Like, yeah, if you're a lifeguard, you can go out and get a drowning swimmer. But, like when the white takes somebody underwater, are you jumping in to try to save them, or are you getting a dinghy and trying to take a Zodiac out there to pick them up? You're not jumping in the water, because all you're going to do is be chum. You're not saving the person.
Okay, so I'm such a time optimist. We could chat for days about this, but I'm going to keep pumping on to some other practical questions. This time more around, does it matter to US investors to have a US customer base, or is it not relevant?
No. They want to know you're eventually going to go there because it's an important market. But if you're thriving in Australia, thriving in Europe, thriving in Canada, they know that it will work. So most investors don't invest out of the English language. So that would be, Japanese companies, I would give a different piece of advice, which is it's culturally so different that you shouldn't even go after American investors. They're not going to understand the culture. They can't use the product. There's going to be a language barrier in all likelihood between your team and their team. So, you're better off having somebody who understands Japanese culture, Japanese customers, right? Now, I can understand, people from Melbourne versus Sydney. It's kind of like,
Same.
Brooklyn and New York and Boston. And I kind of get the vibes, and so I can figure it out. Right. So, yeah. Right.
We have a bit of a lucky advantage there. In terms of scaling in the US, so let's say you've already got, maybe you're in group 1, you're growing well here, you're looking to scale in the US. Where should you be setting up your headquarters? Is it San Fran? Is it Austin? What's happening?
Can't go wrong with San Francisco, New York, Austin, Los Angeles, or Miami. Utah also, doing well. What really matters is you've got a great team of 3 or 4 co-founders with product velocity who's obsessed over customers. I would much rather have 3 people in Utah, Salt Lake City, who are, in an office together, 3 co-founders who worked previously at Airbnb or Google or Uber. They've worked together before. They're firing on all cylinders. They've got 5 customers paying $1,000 each a month, and they have feedback coming in, and they're releasing new product every week or two. That I would rather invest in that company than a solo founder on Sand Hill Road next to all the VCs who doesn't have co-founders, has no product velocity, and has an outsourced tech team. In fact, we have a list of 30 reasons to not invest, and one of them is an outsourced tech team and not and a solo founder. Why? We explained it earlier, right? So I think, there's many different places to set up. San Francisco, very expensive, but a lot of density of investors. New York, slightly less expensive, better for media advertising businesses. Awesome talent there, awesome talent in Austin, massively cheaper. Decent talent in Miami, massively cheaper. Los Angeles, medium in terms of expense, medium in terms of talent. Just hard to get people to an office there because traffic. Yeah.
Nice to see it diversifying a little bit. So in short, substance matters though over location for the most part.
I would say performance matters, team matters. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Performance and team matter most. And you can see that in customer delight and customer engagement.
Indeed. We love our customer love. In terms of Australia, New Zealand in particular, have you noticed anything about our founders that either they do really well or very poorly when they're pitching, and how can they stand out?
No, they're excellent. I think, all the lessons learned on podcasts and blog posts translate really well. In America, we like people who have a sense of urgency. And I get the sense that when I meet with Australian founders, they're very dogged, driven, and have a sense of urgency. Sense of urgency, I'm going to get this done with or without you, Jason.
Mm.
We're doing this. It's just a matter of you're coming along for the ride. This is important to me to get done, and it's not contingent on your involvement.
Mm.
That's where people really get excited. Like, yeah, Stripe's going to happen. Uber's happening. Do you want to join us or not? Because
get on.
train's leaving the station.
Yeah. And what about mistakes? What are the kind of key mistakes you see in people when they're reaching out?
Well, you have to do your diligence and understand who the investor is. I get countless, crypto, countless biotech pitches, and I'll get ones for late stage companies. I'm doing my Series C, and like, have you not been paying attention to everything we say? We do early stage, we do pre-seed, seed, and Series A, like that. So not understanding your target is the number one mistake.
Got it. Do lower volume, higher quality, from the sounds of it, what you're saying.
Yeah, it would be. I would rather see you have 30 really targeted firms you're going after and understanding the firm dynamics and spending an hour understanding each of those 30, reading their blog posts, reading their social media, following them on all those things, interacting with them on all their social medias, listening to the podcast. If they wrote a book, reading their book. And then when you email them, you have all that fabric, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to 300 people, you're just doing a mail merge to,
Yeah. And if you are in group 2, which is probably most founders who are kind of, just statistically, that's where people are going to be. Probably most actually in group 3, but for the ones in group 2 as well, progress matters a lot. So even if someone reached out to you now and you're passing for now, if they can reach out in 3 months and show a lot of progress, that can be promising to you as well.
That is one of our biggest things. We ask people on our phone calls, one of the secrets we have is, where do you see yourself in 6 months? What will the traction be? And they'll tell us, and we'll write it down in our database. And then we'll say, okay, great. Would you like to set up a meeting for 6 months from now to check on that progress? And sometimes we'll book the meeting right there, or we'll just put in our database to remind us. It sets an alert. It tells us, hey, check in on this company.
Wicked. All right. Great tips, hyper practical. I'm looking at the Slido. I promised I would. There's top question from Ben. Thank you, Ben. Aussie VCs tend to be scared of D2C startups. There appears to be a large appetite in the US. How can Aussie startups better leverage US D2C? And what's your take on D2C?
Yeah, direct to consumer is doesn't have the margins typically of software. So if we're talking about direct to consumer, like these glasses or this shirt or some product like that, we very rarely see a company that gets sold for, billions of dollars. You had Peloton. You have 8 Sleep, we're investors in that. So direct-to-consumer products are extremely hard. They're low margin. They take a lot of capital. It requires inventory. That being said, we have made 2 investments recently. One is called Final Boss Sours, which is a sour candy that the guys at Science are doing, the people who do Liquid Death and did Dollar Shave Club. And it's got a gaming component to it where you have these sour candies like Sour Patch Kids, and it's got a virality on TikTok. So they have a unique story about how they do their branding, like Mr. Beast does with Feastables. And then we have an investment in a company called Chef's Reactions, or Chef Reactions. And that firm has billions of views on TikTok for their channel where a chef reacts to people cooking. And they have another business they're going to launch that's a direct-to-consumer product, and they will not have to spend money on marketing. So their customer acquisition cost should be 0.
Audience
Mr. Beast, 0. So, and then with, Final Boss Sours, that's a company that is going to have a really lower cost because you have the virality component.
I'd add to that and say as well that it seems like a lot of VCs, you're making a big bet with D2C companies on their marketing and their brand, their audience. And if they don't already have it, it's kind of hard to assess in a far less objective way than software companies, which is obviously sometimes why people shy away from it. There are 2 other big questions at the top here. This is definitely an assumption that Australians have and New Zealanders have about our culture compared to the US in terms of being formal versus informal, the ANZ type, more informal. Is that still the case? Do you want more formality in your meetings, in your emails, or are you pretty relaxed these days?
Yeah, I think people do judge their books by the covers of them. That's why we have an expression. So if you're showing up for a meeting, looking proper is good. I don't think you need to wear a suit, obviously, but I think, having a stain on your hoodie would be bad, but a nice hoodie would be fine, right? So you're wearing a beautiful hoodie. I think it's acceptable. And you brushed your teeth, and I'm assuming you used some deodorant and you took a shower.
Wow.
So pretty basic stuff, right? But I will see people come in looking like slobs. If you want to come in looking like a slob, that's fine. If your performance is off the charts, you could show up, and literally have not used deodorant in a week. And Steve Jobs was famous for not using deodorant and not showering, I think, for some period of his life. It's in the book, in the autobiography, or the biography rather. So I think what really matters is knowing your customers, having a great team, and having great metrics. How you present, be honest, present it in a simple way. I don't think you need to try to game that all too much. Be authentic, and really focus on the team, focus on product velocity, focus on traction, and how well you understand your customers.
Nice. Bit of common sense. Don't do anything wild. And then
prioritization. Yeah.
And then in terms of, you mentioned a couple of times, you're looking 2 to 3 founders. Are you finding, or are you now already considering almost now with the progress in AI, Cursor's just recently take over in the world. My brother's software engineers loving it. People are faster, building quicker. Is there a future you see where actually, solo founders might be okay?
I think what's going to happen is, no, I think solo founders only works when it's like somebody really dynamic, like super, super dynamic. And typically we might remember Zuckerberg as a solo founder. I think he had 2, Eduardo and the other guy. You look at Travis, he had Garrett Camp as his co-founder, and some other early hires. Twitter had like 3, but you only remember Jack. So, I think history tends to remember 1, like Brian Chesky, but he has 2 co-founders. YouTube had 3 co-founders. So yeah, the co-founder thing is really important, but I do think you'll see a 3 co-founder company add 2 people, get to 5 and hit 25 million in revenue, 5 million per person. So we will see people being able to do 5 or 10 jobs with 1 person. It's already starting to happen, right?
Yep. All right, we're pretty much at time.
Oh, okay, great.
I promised one personal question for you. Are you running straight on the dot, JK?
No, you can go 5 minutes over.
Oh, elite. 5 minutes. I'm going to take all of that.
Okay. I don't want to mess up the next speaker.
No. You are the speaker for the day. Don't you worry.
Oh, okay, great.
Question for you. I'll start with this one actually, just to open up the floor to you actually, JCal. I mean, you get asked so many questions. You're on so many panels. You host lots of podcasts. What are you frustrated that people don't ask you about? What do you wish was discussed more often in the startup world?
Oh, gosh, these questions were so good. I don't think you guys missed anything. I think, there are tactical questions and, there are sort of organization building questions and strategy questions, and then there's mission. So, you have those like kind of strata of questions, and, we get very caught up in tactics and strategy. Tactics are things you do today, strategies are things you do for the year, and then mission is something you might do for an entire career or a decade, right? Or two. And so Microsoft wanted to put a computer on every desktop. Google wanted to index the world's information. Now Google's got to change that at 26 years old. Maybe they want to just give you an answer to the world's greatest questions or something. That's not bad. Yeah. The answer to the world's most questions. Yeah. So I think really thinking about the mission of your company is something people don't spend enough time on. What's the big picture here? What is our big picture goal? And, Airbnb, finding a place to stay, or is it allowing people to explore the world in a more interesting way? I would argue Airbnb allows more people to do more traveling and social events and have more joy in their life, right? So then you start thinking, what else could Airbnb do to let people have more joy and experiences in their life? And they launched the experiences business, right? Where they do tours and other things. And I think while that business might not be as money printing as the first one, I think it actually creates a lot of joy and around their brand and gives people something to do. So I think there's something to it.
Nice. Focus on the mission, aspirational part, storytelling a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, storytelling is really easy when you have a noble mission, like helping people get from point A to point B, like Uber does. Like, it's pretty straightforward. Helping you get some delightful food and feed your family, pretty simple mission. DoorDash does a pretty great job. Uber Eats does a pretty great job. Getting you anything, the world's bookstore, and every book in the world available to you right now digitally, on audio, or on your doorstep in the next 48 hours. That's a pretty radical concept by Amazon, right? It used to be getting a book required some work. Now the idea that like acquiring a book would be work for your generation is like, what? Like we used to have to be like, oh, I have to go to the bookstore. I have to ask them to order me this book. In 30 days, I have to go back and pick up that book. That was kind of crazy. It was annoying. And then the book was out of stock. They might have to go call 10 other bookstores and then ask them to ship it and charge you a fee.
I'm tossing up between a couple of questions here. There's one more in the Slido. We haven't spoken about this much. It's probably a good topic to cover just for the founders out there. So I'm going off our personal questions for 1 second here. When it comes to deep tech hardware as opposed to software, would any of the advice you've given so far around the three buckets change?
Well, there are deep tech investors now, like Steve Jurvetson's fund. And so if you can, if you've got a really deep, talented bench, that's in a situation where pre-product, you're by definition going to be pre-product for a long time because you're doing something deep tech. That's where you have this great exception. You find those investors who are willing to take those crazy risks. They're going to be betting 100% on the team. I'd say 90% on the team, and then 10% on some technological innovation that's occurring right now. So, you've determined, that, you're Joby and you've realized, hey, these quadcopters and cell phones have created incredible energy density in batteries. And if it triples between now and the next 10 years, we're going to be able to put a human in a drone and we'll fly them in a VTOL. And we'd like to get started on that. Kind of a crazy vision, but, those VTOL companies now are running, very significant tests where they're putting humans in these and flying them, on basically full flights now. So, city like Sydney with a bunch of bays, all those ferries, you're going to go to the ferries down by the Opera House and there'll be, a pier or two, maybe by Harry DeWheel's. We get those meat pies with the mushy peas and the gravy.
Oh my God, I feel like I should know this, but I don't.
You don't know about Harry DeWheel's?
Oh my God,
Somebody will put it in the chat, but anyway, it's a meat pie. They smash it, put some gravy in it, and some mashed peas. Anyway, it's delicious. It's open 24 hours, or it's open late. If you had a couple drinks, it's a good place to go in Sydney. Anyway, it's on a pier and a dock, kind of like in nowhere. But you'll be able to go there and jump in a VTOL and go to whatever
absolutely
the
wild.
zoo is. There's that zoo you take going across the bay.
Yes, there's a great zoo there, Taronga.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You just go right to that zoo.
Last question, personal question.
Oh, here we go.
Politics It's
Yeah.
the
Hate
US
it.
is a different
Disgusting.
beast.
The
Yeah, I mean,
worst.
it's just the All In
It's
podcast
gross.
is enjoyable,
It's
and we love
destroyed
it.
it.
But it's
I think it's
all
destroyed
consuming.
the pod. I'll say it. It's destroyed the pod.
Well,
for me.
you might have gotten you heaps of listeners because it's obviously a very
It did. It
engaging.
literally has probably doubled the podcast listenership in the past 2 years to go into politics, but I
Yeah.
cannot wait for this disgusting election to be over.
Okay, all
Politics is
right.
toxic.
I was wondering if that might be the case. So you don't really enjoy it.
I
It's more
hate
of a
it.
burden for you than an interest.
Well, it is a burden because I actually am a very nuanced person who is not part of either political party. And, you know, Sachs is like, it really matters to him who wins.
Yeah.
You know, and these MAGA people in the United States are lunatics. And then the liberals and the woke people, they're also lunatics. So I am hated by MAGA. And the only group that hates me more than MAGA are the woke left because they think I'm a traitor for some reason. And I'm like, I was never part of the woke left. I'm obviously not part of this like lunatic right. I've
Yeah.
always been a moderate. Stay out of people's lives, have a small government. You know, in terms of geopolitics, my only belief is the free countries should protect each other from the dictators of the world. So if all the free countries in the world could get together and they decide that they want to stop a dictator from invading another free country, sounds pretty noble to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm naive, but I think democracy is worth fighting for. And I think dictators are worth containing. So, you know, if China wants to take Taiwan and they want to blockade Australia and give you guys a hard time after you've been such great partners to them, like, I really think like Australia, Korea, Japan, New Zealand, the EU, the UK, South America, the United States, Canada. I mean, if China wants to take Taiwan, would it be wrong for the rest of the free world to say maybe that's not cool? You know, it sounds crazy, but you know, nobody wants to see a war. But I do think it's noble for us to protect free countries from invasion by dictators. Maybe
There
I'm
you go.
crazy.
Politics in a
I don't know,
nutshell.
Ben.
If you're hated by everyone, maybe you're in the right place.
Personal freedom and stop the dictators.
I like it.
Does it
I'll
sound too
subscribe to
crazy?
that.
And maybe
I
I'm a
like it.
crazy American.
All right. Well, we might end things there. I feel horrible taking
Okay.
up a bit more of your time, but I want to say just on that note, a big shout out to you and the All In team because you know the world is more divisive than we'd like it to be. I mean, definitely in the US and even more global, even in Australia. Actually, by the way, shout out to Paul Bassett who recently launched Amplify locally to try and reunite the country.
Oh, good.
Thank you for running a podcast and you know dealing with these tough conversations with a lot of respect. I think you're paving a great path for other people to do the same. So
Thank you, my friend.
appreciate that. J. Cal, to wrap up, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Any closing words?
Very simple. My email for life is jason@calacanis.com. My DMs are open on X and Twitter. So, and LinkedIn and everywhere. Yeah.
Amazing. J. Cal,
Okay.
been an
Appreciate
absolute
it.
pleasure.
Cheers,
thank
Al.
you for coming down. And I'm
Okay.
sure plenty of people will reach out to you online.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks for
Goodbye,
having me.
everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm sure we'll send you through a follow-up email and keep chatting. The series is going to continue going. I think it's once a month, Batco, if you're still around. We're going to be keeping these firesides happening. Lots more tips for founders, investors. We will see you online again soon. I hope you enjoyed. That was a hell of a good time. Enjoy your Friday. Bye-bye.